Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, Jagtar Singh Johal is spectacularly cleared of one of the charges against him. Progress at last. But that still leaves 8 other questionable cases against him still to fight. More on that in a moment, but meanwhile, progress also in the United States as we update on the various cases brought by the community against the Government of India over transnational repression. In Canada, we look at a TV cop drama series featuring a Sikh actress as the strong female lead. And it's day one of Trump's tariffs against Canada and Mexico. Where is this all going to lead? All this and more on today's show. But joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus. I hope you're doing well today, and I hope that our audience is also doing well. Lots of comments coming in. We love it. We want to see some more viewers and more subscribers, so by all means, do us a favor and please like, follow, and share with your friends. Invite them to be a part of the show with you. Thanks again, and back to you, Angus.
Absolutely. Please do get the word around, because James and I together, we bring you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And we will, of course, as usual, be taking a look at loads of great comments which have been filling up below the videos. So thank you, as always, for those. Right, James, let's get the show underway. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
We're going to start off with Season 2 has launched of the Vancouver area production called Allegiance. And it is a partnership with several studios, including Universal Studios International. And it is called Allegiance. Now, what makes this very unique is that it is actually created. One of the show creators and stars is a Sikh female playing the lead role in a police drama series. And it is really cool because it also delves into a lot of Sikh issues, and they bring up things including the 1984 genocide. They bring up issues including human rights abuses, transnational repression. They bring up all of these issues that are very important. And the actual police department is in the series located in Surrey, British Columbia. So it is unlike a lot of shows where Vancouver and the Metro Vancouver area doubles for Portland or Seattle or, pretty much anywhere in North America. But what makes this unique is it's a Canadian series that's done extremely well in the ratings after the first season. It's been renewed and actually just launched Season 2. So you can get it online. But again, it is such a great show. And in all disclosure, I have appeared in the background of a few episodes. But believe me, that's not what makes the show great. As I said, they just really delve into it. Now, the lead character, she is actually an RCMP officer, and she's trying to clear her politician father from a false scandal and corruption allegations. And it delves into also the whole family dynamics of being Canadian, but also being Sikh, and how they work together and how they come to realization of certain things that are different and to adapt to the Canadian world. So it's really cool that way. And they explore a lot of the issues that are actually facing the local Surrey community. So that would be, of course, being a police drama. They don't hide the fact that there is animosity towards police by some parts of the community. They face that head on. They aren't anti-cop, but they also try to show the reality of the atmosphere towards policing in this modern day. Now, as I said, they deal with other issues such as the religious part of the family's background and their beliefs, and it really exposes the mainstream viewers to this series. It's on the CBC, which is essentially for those in the UK. You've got the BBC. The CBC is basically the Canadian equivalent. Now, this show has also taken off on various streaming platforms, including Gem, which is CBC's platform, but other ones as well internationally. So they are doing well in picking up viewership and really giving a great position of leadership in the series to a leading Sikh actress. I think is wonderful. But go past that, and actually one of the showrunners, which is the creator and producer, is actually the same actress. So she has been instrumental in bringing the story to the small screen and really putting Sikh values and traditions right there front and center for the viewer. So it's really, really cool. I encourage you to check it out. As I said, they do talk about the generational trauma from the genocides of 1984. So they don't hide any of this stuff. They bring it right to the viewer and allow people to learn by the experience that they're viewing, that the learned experience from the characters on screen. So it makes it quite different than most of the shows that are out there. And I think that it is also a huge, huge win for the Sikh community to have a show that features them in a very positive and realistic position, as opposed to being a convenience store clerk, or, you know, the way that a lot of what I find degrading roles go to Sikhs or Koreans or other people of different nationalities and of minority races. This one here brings them front and center in that position. It has done very well. They really do stream through the navigating of the prejudice, of stereotypes, and the life experiences. So again, I think that if you haven't seen the show, check it out. It is created by an RLE, and the showrunner team includes also Mark Ellis and Stephanie Morgenstern. And again, it is developed here in Surrey, British Columbia, and is made to be a part of this multicultural community. So check it out. It's on CBC, CBC Gem, and other services or other provision or providers as well. So yeah, definitely check it out. If you haven't seen it, I think that you will find it a great show that really highlights Sikhs in such a great and positive way, but also through real life type stories, not so much of the exaggeration of a lot of police situational drama series, Angus.
This is fantastic. I don't know if I'll be able to have a view of that from over here in Europe, but it really is a sign of the times, and a very positive sign of the times. There's been a huge drive across the media, as I'm sure you've seen as well, James, about diversity, about trying to get a more diverse, broader church, let's call it, of people into the media, both in front of the camera and behind the camera, which has actually been pretty successful. Now, the trouble is, though, is that it does take two forms, and one form I think is least successful. That is, it's almost diversity for the sake of diversity, and we have suffered to some degree here in the UK, where the BBC has been very proudly pushing forward diverse faces in front of the camera in all sorts of roles. But it's got almost to the point of farce, and it's actually working counterproductive. Where, for example, I think we did a historic series of Anne Boleyn, one of the wives of Henry VIII, who was black. Now we know historically, of course, Anne Boleyn wasn't black. And it almost made a mockery of the whole diversity thing, and that's where it goes wrong. This, on the other hand, is a prime example of where they get it absolutely right in a very positive way, because this is a Sikh taking a lead role, not just for the sake of diversity, but it actually, by the looks of it, James, the whole story is written around her culture, her background, in the context of 1984, the problems that the community face. In other words, it's actually genuinely, it's an insight, it's a deep insight into the life of a Sikh in Canada, which is actually extremely informative, extremely powerful, and extremely helpful in educating the wider audience about these are the issues that the Sikh community face, these are the problems that they face, these are the misinterpretations, like we're not Muslims, we are a different religion, etc., just because we wear turbans, etc. And it reminds me actually of a fantastic film, which I really urge people to go watch, particularly if you're in Europe and particularly the UK. It's a film called East is East, and this did the same thing about the Muslim community, the Islamic community in the north of England. And I watched this many years ago, and I was brought up in the north of England, where we have a large Asian population, particularly in a city called Bradford. And there is traditionally there's a lot of prejudice. You know, it's the same old racism that was prevalent decades ago. But this film was set, I think it's set back in the 70s and 80s and then into the 90s, about a family. It was a white indigenous woman who married a very traditional Pakistan man. They had children, so they were second generation children born in the UK, and it was the battle between the traditional father trying to instill the traditional Muslim values into the children that are being seduced by white society, by alcohol and partying and discos, etc., etc. But it is a fascinating insight that educated people like myself into understanding the problems that community, that I never had any idea that they suffered, the problems they suffered, and I saw it from their perspective, and the battle, of course, of those caught. It'll be the same in the Sikh community, the Sikhs who were born in the UK, for example, who will have parents who came from the Punjab, who are trying to push traditional Punjabi Sikhi values, and the kids growing up in the UK finding these other distractions, let's say. But in terms of education, it has things like this have such a powerful effect in breaking down those barriers of getting people like us, James, to understand these issues that the communities suffer. So I think this is fantastic. This is such a powerful tool that I think will have a massive impact on spreading the knowledge and just the issues that the community face. Great news, James. I'm really delighted to see this. I hope we can dig it out over here in the UK.
Absolutely. And yeah, you never know. A lot of shows that are on the BBC end up on CBC Gem. So I don't know if it shows up on the BBC streaming network with that bilateral or that co-production partnership there. So watch for it on the BBC. You never know. And the bridge in the background, that's just a few minutes from the Surrey Gurdwara. So yeah, it is really cool to watch the show and actually see the city representing itself for a change. So that's pretty cool. And I must say, it is a fun show to work on. The cast, the crew is amazing. And you get some of the different shows where it is really, some of the cast and crew can be pretty stuck up when you are just there on a day call as an actor or background or whatever. But no, it's a great show. It's a very, very positive environment as well. And I think that really brings forward the Sikh beliefs as well. And that is just the welcoming attitude of the production, which I think helps to make the production overall work, Angus. Now, speaking of productions, as we can describe the whole situation with the tariffs kicking in Canada, in Mexico, in China, it has been nothing short of a production on network television, news television. They are all talking about it, and even some hilarious memes that I didn't get to bring up here on the screen. I didn't get them there, but it's of Ontario's Premier Doug Ford, and he's basically replayed when Trump was yelling about turning the lights down at one of his speeches, and Doug Ford has said that he's going to take great pleasure in turning the electric switch off to the U.S. and stop exporting electricity, and you see him doing a dance with Donald Trump yelling, "Turn down the lights." So check it out. If you're on social media, do a search for that. It is hilarious. But getting to the more serious side of this, Angus, is that it is day one of, well, I guess it'll be day two by the time everybody wakes up and watches the show, because we're filming very early in the morning here. And so, yeah, when you do get up in North America to watch a show, or later today there in the UK, you're going to be seeing a lot more, I am sure, about the tariffs and the response by Canada, by Mexico, and by, of course, the US. China's been kind of quiet. Canada has launched their reciprocal trade tariffs, and they are focusing in on about $30 billion worth of trade at this time. And with that said, they do anticipate introducing another $115 billion worth of tariffs on trade coming up within the next 3 weeks. They are scheduled for that in 21 days. And when you look at the tariffs as they are very wide-reaching. And what makes this really difficult for it to be accepted by Canadians is that we've had a very long-standing trade agreement, whether it was the North American Free Trade Agreement or the subsequent one that Trump renegotiated during his last term, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement. Those have been focused. And what happens is that when you are are putting tariffs on any products, it's supposed to be universal. So if you are charging a 10-cent tariff on an apple coming in from Canada, you've got to charge that same 10-cent tariff to Mexico when they send apples into your country. So it's, different than how the international regulations and rules of trade work. It goes against those. So we'll have to see. But Canada has definitely stood up and put them on notice that, yes, we are going to be implementing reciprocal trades, or tariffs, sorry. And they are starting with instances such as food, with energy, with what else was there? There's alcohol. There's thousands and thousands of products that we bring up, whether it's bourbon or whiskey. Different items that are actually selling in Canada and Ontario themselves. The government runs the major distribution point at a wholesale level for all of the stores in the province that retail liquors and beers and all of that. And they are one of the largest purchasers at wholesale level of alcohol from the United States. So that is a huge one, and people don't realize how much that is going to impact the U.S. economy, but also Canadians. Because again, when we are paying the tariffs of the retaliatory tariffs that we're paying, of course, our prices are going up. The inflation is going up. With the U.S., the inflation is predicted to go up 4% per year at this rate of tariffing, and if it goes up further, then of course so will inflation. Canada has not yet really put out numbers, but they do anticipate over a 3.4 to 3.6% reduction in our economy and our GDP. And Mexico's looking at about a 2% reduction in theirs. So it's going to have immediate and long-term ramifications, even if the tariffs were to end after 30 days, which I don't think they will. But if they were, then it's still going to take time to start to build up those relationships again, because even if there is a new trade agreement reached, whether or not Canada or other countries are going to be gun shy about entering into trade agreements that can be essentially ripped up at any time. Now, Justin Trudeau stood his ground and he stood firm against Donald Trump, saying that, his words were that, Donald Trump, you are a smart man, but what you are doing is so stupid. And that is what he said on national or international television, calling him out on this, because the trade war is going to not only hurt Canada, not only hurt Mexico, but it's going to hurt the U.S., and that is not good. Of course, the big issue behind the tariffs is the information that we've brought previously about the immigration issues, about the fentanyl issues, and other substances and illegal substances making it across the U.S. border. But let's not forget that, first of all, of course, their border patrol and their border services are the ones that are responsible for catching that as it comes across the border, not the other way around. We're responsible to catch what is flowing from the U.S. into Canada. And let me tell you, right now, with all of the changes that have been made at the Canadian border to help the U.S. to fight this battle, there has been 0.3 of a kilogram in the last month of fentanyl that's been caught going into the U.S. So that is just a minuscule amount that's been caught going into the U.S. now that all of these changes and increases have been made. The new task force that is a joint operation task force to target the producers and the distributors of fentanyl on both sides of the border. Canada has introduced the new Black Hawk helicopters. They are in the air providing support and monitoring of our border services. And yeah, there's so many things that have happened, and to bring that down to such a very small amount, it doesn't make sense to have these restrictions on the border, or these tariffs implemented based on that at the Canadian-U.S. border. When you look at the numbers of immigrants, of course, we are actually seeing an influx of people trying to get from the U.S. across the Canadian border. The numbers going south to the U.S. are just very, very small in comparison. So again, it is, we've got to look at what is the end game here for these tariffs. And as Canada has very firmly said that they are putting the reciprocal tariffs in, Donald Trump has said that is a bold and a horrible move because he is going to increase his tariffs to retaliate against us for having the nerve, so to speak, to increase tariffs on his country. And so he seems to be on this delusion that that the tariffs were going to be a one-way street, that we were going to sit back and take it, and we're not. We will shut off energy, we will shut off electricity, we will shut off, and it's going to be a very painful thing for the Canadian economy. It's going to cost jobs, but as Justin Trudeau very clearly told Donald Trump on television, is that we will win this game. We are there for the long haul, and we will not back down from protecting the sovereignty and the economy of Canada. And that's where we're at, Angus, on this war as it heats up across the borders here in Canada, the U.S. and Mexico. And of course, as I said, China's been quite quiet so far on their additional 10% tariffs. So they had 10% already. Now they have seen an additional 10% across the board tariffs for the most part hit them as well.
Yeah, when Donald Trump first became president, I did say at the time I was a huge supporter. I wasn't to start with, but I became a supporter of Donald Trump, primarily because I said at the time, he's going to shake things up. He's either going to start World War III or he's going to create world peace. There's going to be no in between. And this is pretty much what he's about. And I think his second term is that on steroids. Because he's coming in and he said, right, I've been elected on these key points and I'm going to deliver. You're not going to like the way I do it, but I am going to deliver. And this is exactly what he's doing. Now, and again, I still almost jump back to this, I still remain a supporter of Trump, but I still sort of sit back and think, God, I hope he's right. Because it literally is still this polarised result. It's either going to be World War III or he is going to create world peace. There is almost in between. But, for example, he's up against a lot. He's up against the prevailing narrative. He's up against the mainstream narrative that's always been anti-Trump because he likes to upset the status quo. He's a threat to the status quo, this comfortable, cosy status quo that has ruled the globe, let's say, for the last couple of decades at least. And he's come along and he's shaking things up. The Ukraine war, as another example, the Ukraine war has been rattling on for 3 years. Europe has been, Europe has been encouraging the war. They've been feeding the war machine, the Ukraine war machine. And Trump's come along and he said, look, and Biden likewise, again, I've talked about the failure of US policy. To me, it's always been US policy and NATO in cahoots who created this war and conveniently blamed it on Putin's invasion of Ukraine, but they provoked Putin into that, so the roots go back a long way. But Trump's come in and he said, look, no, this has got to stop. This war has to stop. I'm going to stop it. You're not going to like the way I'm going to do it, but I'm going to stop it. And this is Trump to a T. He's up against, as I say, this huge mainstream narrative, and they hate the way he does things. But all he says is, I deliver results. He's actually now potentially going to deliver Ukraine, peace in Ukraine, as he promised. Everybody hates the fact Europe are spitting blood about it. But as I said in one of my earlier rants about Ukraine, yeah, but what have you been doing about it for the last 3 years? You've been talking about it and feeding arms and ammunition to Ukraine, not bringing peace. And now the fact that he's bringing peace, you're absolutely hating the fact. And this is the same with tariffs. And of course, the mainstream economic narrative is this is dreadful. This is the worst thing you could ever do. It's just going to create global trade wars. Yeah, it probably is. But what is the end game going to be? What is the result going to be? I don't know. And I hope to God that Trump is right. But ultimately, and I do see where he's coming from, and I actually do think it's almost worth a go just to see what does happen. Now, I think it lasts. They're trying to claim, critics claim this happened in the 1930s, which actually brought on the Great Depression. I don't think it did. There were other reasons the Great Depression came on. But they're using that as an example to beat Trump with, to say, no, all this is going to do is create a global depression. Well, actually, in reality, what it is going to do is it is going to create self-sufficiency in nations like the United States. That's really what it's about. It is actually going to increase self-sufficiency in Canada and all these other nations. And that is the positive outcome. What it's trying to do is generate more industry, more self-sufficiency within the US to stop the reliance on external suppliers like China, unfortunately, like for you, James, like in Canada, etc. And it's going to, but what it does, it creates short-term pain. Yes, there is going to be inflation. Yes, there's going to be all these horrible, painful consequences for everybody, including United States citizens. But the long term is that it's going to engender and grow local suppliers. It's going to grow the own internal economy. So the long-term benefit is massive. I'll use it as an example. Sanctions against Russia, against Iran. What have they achieved? Yes, on the face of it, they were political sanctions against these dreadful regimes. All it's actually achieved, it has encouraged Iran and Russia to generate their own internal industries. It's increased massively entrepreneurship. I'll take Iran as an example. We couldn't sell anything into Iran. See, in the oil and gas industry, for example, Iran, all the entrepreneurs then got into their little workshops and started building their own solutions. And quite often these solutions were even better than the West was supplying. So these sanctions created this energy, this economic engine internally within Iran that is now building their own supply, their own capabilities, which actually in many cases is far superior to what they were buying in from the West. So that was the effect of sanctions. And this is, I'll use this as an example, this is the potential outcome of tariffs. It's going to help American developers, manufacturers and service providers to build their own equivalents that currently they're importing from Canada, from China, etc., etc. So that to me is the potential outcome, James. It's a very, very dangerous game, though. As I said, I do hope it's going to work, because if he gets it wrong, ouch, the world is going to suffer. But I think his eye is on the goal, the prize at the end, which is, as he's promised to his own electorate, I will deliver the good results and I will grow American industry. This is the painful way, but everybody ultimately could benefit from this. I don't know if he's right, James. I certainly hope he is.
Absolutely, Angus, and you know me, I'm on the opposite end of that spectrum. I think that it is going to do much more damage than it's going to do good. I think that there are benefits to his different policies, to some of them, but I think others are going to be detrimental to his own country, because I think that looking at the long term, I mean, to get any of these manufacturing facilities up and running, they've got to build them. They've got to bring in the materials to build, to manufacture. I just don't see that they're going to have the labor pools and the facilities available. And if they do, it's going to be several years in the making. So I don't know that it's going to last that long, but I do think that there is a very small benefit, but I think it's going to be a major net loss for Americans. And let's hope I'm wrong on that. And one thing that you did state is that it is going to increase the self-sufficiency, and we're seeing that in Canada already with the Buy Canadian movement and such. So that's having a big effect. A lot of the various border crossings are seeing the actual recent numbers are a 30 to 40% decrease in traffic crossing into the U.S. at this time, including going across the Blaine border, which is where a lot of Canadians fly out of to U.S. destinations, given how cheap it is in comparison to flying out of Canada. So to finish this off, though, I'll just bring up the final point, is that Canada is filing an application for resolution claim at the WTO because, again, this is against the USMCA agreement. And but Trudeau was also very clear, speaking to Americans, saying that we want to work with you as a friend and an ally. We don't want to see Americans hurt either in this, but the government has chosen to do this and we have to respond. But he also was very clear to Americans that when the Canadians are booing a national anthem at a game, we are not booing Americans. We are not booing the United States as a whole. We are booing the policies that are put in place, including tariffs. We are not, we're not against Americans at all. So I think that's an important point to really put forward, Angus.
Absolutely, no, I agree with that, and I think just going back to again about Trump delivering results. I mean, one of the US has been essentially protecting Europe for decades at the expense of American taxpayers, and his actions recently, whether you like them or not, the end result, which is what really matters, is that suddenly the UK have announced that, yeah, we're going to up our defence budget from 2.5 or 2.3% up to 3%. It's taken decades for anybody to achieve that. Likewise, the whole of Europe, and now all the governments are saying, yeah, we're going to increase our budget, our contribution to NATO. Well, Trump has achieved this in a matter of 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, by taking unpopular action, but the results speak for themselves. People don't like what he does, but he delivers the results, and that's the key, James. So, but anyway, let's move on, because we've got a lot to get through, and we could talk about Trump, you and I, for days, I'm sure, because it's always such a fun topic to talk about.
Absolutely. I just thought it was important to bring the first day to an end and just report on it, where we're at, and let's hope that this trade war is not something long-term.
Indeed. Right, let's move on, James, as time marches on. I'm going to do a huge legal area now. There's lots going on the legal front, particularly in Europe and the Americas. I'm going to start off with in the United States, and one of the cases that we've been talking a lot about, James, is the trial of Nikhil Gupta, the agent of the Indian state, or alleged agent of the Indian state, who is being charged, with various charges, but these include, of course, this assassination attempt on Jagtar Singh Johal, the founder or co-founder of Sikhs for Justice. And Nikhil Gupta, it turns out, his legal team have obviously been fighting his case. He's just been recently extradited from the Czech Republic. And things are starting to move forward now, as the United States District Judge, Victor Marrero, has ordered that the parties involved, on both sides, should submit a joint letter addressing when this trial date should happen, but it must happen within June or July of this year. In other words, the clock is ticking, the judge is saying, right, I'm not hanging around, let's get on with this. So I want to set a date in either June or July this year. So in the next few months, James, we're going to see Nikhil Gupta in court. And likewise, he's ordered the proposed schedule for pre-trial submissions prior to that, and how long this trial should go on for. So things are moving forward in the Nikhil Gupta case, which is great to see. Contrast that, of course, with the slow pace of Indian justice. And as part also of Nikhil Gupta's case, as I said, there are an array of charges against him. But one of them, of course, is money laundering. And of course, he was involved, and he was charged with offering money to a local hitman, let's say, who was actually turned out to be a member of US law enforcement, unfortunately for Mr. Gupta. And this money was allegedly came from money laundering. And there was an attempt by Nikhil Gupta's defence team to throw that particular charge out through a bit of legal shenanigans, let's call it. But the US government have worked with the Czech Republic, and the Czech Republic have confirmed a few sort of arcane legal things, which has allowed the US government to say, no, you cannot throw that particular charge out. That charge still stands. And you will also be charged with this charge of money laundering alongside, and it does actually say that Vikas Yadav, one of these co-accused, will also be charged under the same charge. And I'll just quickly read from, this is count 3, this is the third count against him, conspiracy to commit money laundering. It actually says it was a part and an object of the conspiracy that Vikas Yadav, also known as Vikas, and Amanat, and Nikhil Gupta, also known as Nick, and others known and unknown would and did transport, transmit and transfer, and attempt to transmit, transfer, blah, 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 funds from a place in the US to and through a place outside the US to a place back in the US, etc., etc. In other words, that money was dirty money, is what it boils down to. So the two of them will face that charge as well. So that's good news, James, that things are moving forward on the Nikhil Gupta case. Now, the other case, of course, that is... I would say slightly less likely to proceed, but certainly is being pursued with equal vigour by the legal team, is the case against India's National Security Advisor, Ajit Doval, who Govt Singh Johal is accusing, within the same case, this is a private civil case being brought by Johal against Ajit Doval, again related to the assassination plot against Govt Singh Johal himself. And Johal is alleging that Ajit Doval was directly involved in this case, that he was part of the team that ordered the hit on Panoon himself. So the biggest problem, I did report this the other day, was that Panoon had to officially serve papers on Ajit Doval. And without doing that, the case couldn't then proceed. And we've had a little bit of an inside. Jagtar Singh Johal has actually put in the public domain now a bit more inside information about how this all happened. And he said documents filed in the federal court show that Mr. Panoon has served a copy of the lawsuit against Ajit Doval during his recent trip with Narendra Modi. The lawsuit asserts that the Government of India, Mr. Doval and several high-ranking officers in the research and analysis wing hired Nikhil Gupta to murder him. The plot, as we know, was foiled when Mr. Gupta tried to hire an undercover US agent. And according to Mr. Panoon's complaint, the murder-for-hire plot was part of India's broader effort to kill prominent Sikh activists. And this is what it's really all about. It's about the whole transnational oppression policy and operation underway against the whole khalistan movement. The new documents reveal that Mr. Panoon hired 2 separate process servers and a PI, a private investigator, to serve the complaint on Mr. Doval during his visit. Declarations filed state that, contrary to court order, US Secret Service members tried to refuse service of the documents, which Mr. Panoon also sent to the location where Mr. Doval was staying, presumably his hotel. However, service on Mr. Doval was carried out pursuant to the court's February 2025 order. In light of these efforts, Mr. Panoon respectfully submits that service on defendant is complete officially. In other words, it has been officially served. Mr. Doval has 21 days to respond. And Mr. Panoon says, I have full faith and trust in the American justice system. I'm confident that perpetrators of violent transnational oppression will be brought to justice in criminal and civil courts. And he added, Doval's status as Modi's national security advisor will not shield him from American law for long. And he said, and his legal team said, we are glad to start the clock on Mr. Doval. That was Mr. Panoon's attorney, Matthew Borden. His lawyers are Braun Hagee and Borden, LLP, based in New York, I believe. And they said that Ajit Doval is an important defendant in our case. He will not be able to hide his involvement. We are looking forward to taking evidence from him and obtaining justice for our client. Well, there you go, James. It will. I don't think we'll ever see Mr. Doval in a law court in the United States. I don't think he'll have the courage to defend his position. Well, let's see. But certainly, I think it's more about sending a message to the world at large that this case is serious and the accusation is serious, and it's holding India's government in the spotlight. We're doing it properly on our side, says Mr. Panoon. We are following the rule of law, and we are holding you to account, unlike the other way around, James. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely. And there could be an extension of that 21 days because he is a foreign diplomat. There may be extensions. I know in Canada there would be extensions outside of Canada as opposed to inside for domestic service of papers and then filing a response. We'll have to watch and see, and whether or not he just hires a U.S.-based attorney to handle that is another question. And again, if he never shows up, the question will be is if he is found liable in absentia by the courts without, in basically a default judgment for not showing if he does not have representation showing. And I think that that's where the lawyers will get really sticky as it proceeds to have him appear in person. Now, Matthew Borden and his firm is a very large firm. They have a very, very good reputation in North America in many different facets of whether it is corporate litigation or civil. They've got a huge reputation for no nonsense, move it forward and find resolutions, and they are not afraid to take it to trial if it goes that far, Angus.
It's going to be interesting. Well, we will follow that very closely, and good luck to Mr. Panoon on that one. But likewise, the Nikhil Gupta case, which is obviously a proper criminal case brought by the US government, that is going to be a case that we definitely will follow with great interest. Right, James, let's move on. And this is really fantastic news. It's just come out of India over the last 24 hours. And Jagtar Singh Johal, who we often talk about and we regularly raise his plight, who's been arbitrarily detained by the Indian government for his actions in highlighting their dreadful behaviour throughout the 80s and 90s. He quite effectively collated evidence of the extrajudicial killings of many Sikhs in the Punjab at the time, and as a result, he found himself arrested and detained arbitrarily by the US government under very questionable charges. Over 7 years ago, he's remained in prison to India's shame and to the UK's shame. He's a British citizen. The UK have done very little, in fact, virtually nothing about this. But his case, he has 9 cases against him and 9 charges against him. And as I often report, he's reached this huge legal milestone of 150 trial hearings on just one of the cases, one of the 9 cases, and the prosecution on behalf of the Indian government just keep failing to produce the witnesses, etc. And the case keeps getting postponed and delayed and delayed further and further. Basically, the cases have just been going on indefinitely, and as many people have accused, and the belief is the Indian government are doing this very deliberately to send a message out to anybody who dares politically stand up to the Indian government and call out its behaviour. We will imprison you. If you give us a chance, we'll imprison you, and you will never see the light of day ever again. And unfortunately, Jagtar Singh Johal has become the victim of this. So anyway, overnight, a verdict in the district court in Moga, Punjab, has acquitted him of conspiracy under the country's anti-terror law and of being a member of a terrorist gang. His legal team say the allegations against Mr. Johal in all the cases, all 9, for which he faces the death penalty, are close to identical, and that the other charges should now be dismissed. Gurpreet, his brother, and I do refer people to the interview I did with Gurpreet a few months ago. Gurpreet, who's been battling for all 7 years to bring him home and lobbying the British government to do something about it, he again has called on the UK government to secure his brother's release now that one of the charges has been dropped. And he told the BBC Scotland News, "My brother has had 7 years of his life wasted in jail. The UK government needs to bring him home." Now, a spokesperson for the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, the FCDO, welcomed the progress in the case. Well, great, well done. Thanks to that, but what else are you doing? They say the UK government remains committed to working for faster progress on Jagtar's case. The FCDO continue to work to support Mr. Johal and his family. And Mr. Johal Jaggi was accused of being a member of a terror group, the KLF, the Khalistan Liberation Force, which has carried out attacks in the Punjab region. Now, the charges against him stated that he travelled to Paris in 2013 and delivered £3,000 to other KLF figures. And that money was then used to purchase weapons, which were used in a series of murders and attacks against Hindu nationalists and other religious leaders across 2016 and 2017, allegedly. That is the charge, or one of the charges against him. His legal representatives say that the prosecution against him is purely political due to his activism, which I talked about earlier, documenting crimes and atrocities against Sikhs in the Punjab region throughout the 1980s, and that he has been the victim of an unfair legal process, basically a witch hunt. The Indian government denies that Mr. Johal was mistreated in the custody of the Punjab police and has said due process has been followed in the case against him. Well, let me just quickly interject there and say, well, we have accusations of torture. We actually have accusations and evidence that he was electrocuted, that petrol was poured on him and he was threatened to be set alight, etc., etc. So there is evidence of torture. I wouldn't say that is due process, Indian government, and the fact that he still remains in detention 7 years after the charges were brought is not following due process. Or if that is the due process of Indian law, Mr. Modi, then you should be ashamed of yourself. That is not a democratic process of law. So the court verdict in Moga marked the most significant development since it began, with a judge ruling that in the case, at least this case, the charges should not stand and should be released, and 8 other cases against him should also be dropped. That's the Johal team saying that, but they still remain, and of course the campaign is to have them dropped as well, because effectively they reflect the same principles of which this case has just been thrown out. The legal team has questioned the evidence presented against him. They said there is no concrete evidence and that the case was built on the testimony of unreliable witnesses, some of whom have given statements against him only for them to be later recanted in court. And they said that a number of witnesses were declared hostile during the proceedings after refusing to stand by the statements that they gave to the police, while the prosecution failed to produce other witnesses altogether. So the whole case has been absolutely flawed from the start. It's clearly deliberately stacked up against him by the government of India. Clearly these witnesses have been coerced, pressured, intimidated, potentially even paid, who knows, but to give this evidence, this fake evidence against him. And the outfall has, of course, been very predictable, and human rights groups around the world have spoken out constantly about it. And Dan Dolan, as an example, he's a campaigner for the group Reprieve. He's said that for Jagtar to remain imprisoned and facing a death sentence after this acquittal would be a mockery of justice. Well, that's really what all this is, James. The whole thing is a mockery of justice. This is the Indian government imprisoning a political opponent, somebody who had the courage to stand up to them and call out the Indian government's dreadful actions of the 1980s, murdering a whole generation of young Sikh people in the 1980s. And this is what happens. You get sent into prison, never to see the light of day again. This is not due process. This, as Dan Dolan says, is a mockery of justice.
Absolutely. And I mean, if you look at the contrast between how this case is dragged out and then versus the story you just presented before that with regards to the New York cases and how fast those are moving, I mean, it's just night and day, Angus. And I think that what upsets the India government most is the fact that people are still standing up and saying, get Jaggy home. They didn't just turn their backs and forget about him. And I think that's what upsets the India government the most, because they thought they could just lock this guy up and forget about him and make a statement at his expense. And it hasn't worked out that way for India at all. And I mean, of course, his lawyers are going to be saying he's innocent. If I was in that situation, my lawyers came out publicly and said he's guilty, but we're going to try to get him off, I would be quite upset. But let's face it, obviously with this number of appearances, and they can't even get their own witnesses to show up in court, obviously there's nothing there. He is an innocent man that's been locked up for political reasons and needs to be released and sent home to his family, Angus, and that's the way I see it.
Indeed, and let's hope that those other 8 cases follow suit. Yeah. I think the interesting angle on this is why has this suddenly happened? I could give the British government the benefit of the doubt and say that they've actually been working behind the scenes to pressure the Indian government to do this. Maybe this is a result of the British government. Who knows? Alternatively, maybe the Indian government have finally said, oh, you know what, we've got so many issues with Nikhil Gupta case and this whole thing blowing up with Ajit Doval. Maybe let's just get rid of this because this is starting to become a little bit embarrassing. It's starting to make us feel a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe it's pressure from Donald Trump after the recent meeting with Modi with Trump. Who knows? Maybe we will actually never know, but something has happened. Or literally, it may be just the case that finally the due process of law has reached the end, that literally they could string it along no longer, and that it has reached its natural conclusion, and this case was finally thrown out. We don't know. But all that matters, James, is that we get Jaggy home and that these other cases are thrown out as soon as possible. Right, James, let's move on now as we're running out of time.
He's a fan of the show Allegiance and he doesn't want it to be an episode.
Indeed. Well, hopefully one day we may get to see Jaggy on our podcast. We'll see. But best of luck to his brother as well, and continue the fight to bring him home. Right, first comment of the day. This was at the end of our Empire Strikes Back video. Cam Tambar said, we Khalistani Sikhs stand shoulder to shoulder with the UK and US. This I actually thought was quite an important comment, actually. We do often talk about the alignment between the Sikh community and the whole Khalistan movement and the UK and US. And this really does highlight the fact that the values of Khalistan are based on Sikhi. And we've often said that Sikhi actually does align in so many ways with the common values of the West, of democracy, of the rule of law, of equality, all these basic principles, these basic philosophies that have built Western society. And Sikhi does does actually align with that, and actually, to be honest, it enhances it in many ways. And this is why it contrasts and sits so uncomfortably with the way that India is going, and the failure of Indian democracy, the failure of, we talk about the rule of law in India, how that's failing, how the caste system in India is so embedded and is actually so, it just highlights how unequal Indian society is, and this is why Sikhi is so unaligned with the values and interests of India, but are more aligned with the values and interests of the UK and the US, and of course Canada by extension, James.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that is again something that the world can learn from, and I think that's what's going to benefit Khalistan when it happens in the world stage. And yeah, it's going to be a beautiful thing, Angus.
Yeah, and this is why I think the West should support Khalistan, and I think probably behind the scenes will support Khalistan, because again, it will form this powerful, relatively small, geographically speaking, but powerful state in the subcontinent, in the same way that Israel, for example, is in the Middle East. Khalistan will stand on the subcontinent as this hugely powerful democratic nation right in the heart, surrounded by the rest of India, Pakistan, of course, China to the north. So it'll be really, really important strategically for the West. So anyway, thank you for that comment, an important comment. Danny, become one of our regular contributors in the comments column, brought up the subject of drugs. Now, there are two elements to this. Danny talks about the drugs, and of course we talk a lot, James, about the drugs in Punjab, how they're undermining Punjabi society, and particularly the Sikh community, deliberately so, allegedly. And Danny says, look, the drugs are coming from Pakistan. Punjab borders Pakistan. The problem was there throughout the 80s and 90s. Who's supplying these drugs? And these drugs find their way to you, James, in Canada, to us here in the UK. Where is it coming from? Where is the route? A big question. Now, Janagra replies, look, Gujaratis, and this is taking it into a different direction. The two elements here. There's the heroin drugs that particularly come from Afghanistan, actually. That's I do know that's where most of the opium rooted drugs come from, the heroin. That comes from Afghanistan. So it's not a long way to the Punjab. But of course, and then Janagra highlights this other element, which is the Indian legally generated drugs, these synthetic drugs, which are manufactured primarily in Gujarat. And these are the ones that are being supplied to the rest of the world, which we do watch our previous shows about this. And this is India poisoning societies in West Africa that we've talked about, and actually channeling into the United States via Mexico. And so that's what Janagra is saying, is the Gujarati manufacturers that are responsible for that. And then Fatah Singh finalises the comment saying, look, are you still asleep? Calm down. Let's keep it polite. Drugs come from Delhi. They're also direct from the Gujarati ports into occupied Punjab to weaken and kill the Sikh Punjabis. And deliberately so. This changes the democratics of the Sikh population. Sikhs in Punjab state cannot ask or fight for their rights, as they've been slowly but surely being removed and stripped since 1947. So there's a lot of points here, all thrown into one long thread, James. I've just cherry-picked a few comments there. But it does highlight this whole drugs problem. Firstly, the drugs that are pouring into the Punjab, we believe, are part of a deliberate policy to undermine and destroy the Sikh community, in particular the Khalistan movement. And then, of course, there is these synthetic drugs, these fentanyl precursor drugs, which are finding their way all around the world, including the United States and, of course, Africa, which Modi's government are again deliberately turning a blind eye to, James.
Absolutely. And you can look at the various type of, whether it's the synthetics or it's the naturals. But at the end of the day, we have, like every country, we have a problem with the overdose crisis in Canada, and they are coming in at all areas. We've got them coming in through our ports. We've got them coming in through land borders. We've got them coming in through air. And that comes from Central America, from South America, from Asia, from the U.S. I mean, it's everywhere. And don't get me wrong, we know that the Canadian landscape is no different. We have seen recent drug busts of these super labs in Canada. So yeah, we are not an innocent player by any stretch. There is some being manufactured here and exported. So yeah, no, it is something that's going to take a real international cooperation and strategy to overcome. And I think that, that's just a sad state where it is being used to manipulate populations, demographics, and weaken certain populations.
Indeed, absolutely. The evil of drugs and
Yeah.
the damage they do to society. Freddie Mercury, James, this was
right.
your story about Grok AI saying that Sikh would be actually the best, however you define best, the best religion to run the world and have a peaceful, harmonic world. Well, Freddie Mercury says, look, he asked ChatGPT and ChatGPT allegedly, so you say, came up with Buddhism or Christianity because they're based around love and forgiveness. Well, I would say, raise the question, what happened to Buddhism in India? Well, many argue that it was Hinduism, the rise of Hinduism that drove out Buddhism, which in itself does say, well, what does that say about Hinduism? Christianity, in theory, it is based around love and forgiveness, but Christianity is I have to say, compared to Sikh, it has its issues, and I don't want to go down that road because I don't want to offend any Christians. But many of these other religions, compared to Sikh, and I often say this, they have this more aggressive attitude towards other communities, where firstly they're trying to convert them, and secondly there's almost this coercion saying if you don't convert, you face hellfire and damnation. Sikh is not about that. Sikh is totally opposed to that. Sikh is, as I often say, Sikh is all about, well, if you're a Christian, my job, my philosophy is to make you a better Christian, etc. And that is the difference, and that is why I actually believe what AI said. I'm more aligned with AI's conclusion that it's Sikh is the result. And Jen Agra pops in here and says, have you ever read The Principles of Sikhism? Which, I think reinforces what I've just said. And S. Bain says, a little hurt. No. Yeah, but I think it's a little bit surprising, James. How do you feel about that one?
I think that it depends. And here they're using ChatGPT, and I mean, the different algorithms are subject to the human input as well as the other inputs in which the machine learning takes place. So it can be modified. It can be imbalanced. It can be, so yeah, it's a fun thing to play with. It's a fun thing to look at and try to look at the perspectives of what points it brings forward. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's not about one religion ruling the world. It's about how all religions can come together to live as one in a harmonious society, whether you're in Surrey, British Columbia, whether you're in London, England, whether you're in, Jakarta, or it doesn't matter anywhere in the world. It's all about coming together for everyone to be respected. And I think that's the big point. But again, ChatGPT, Grok, Meta AI, they can all get it wrong. I mean, face it, I had to do a recent valuation on my company, and just out of curiosity, I typed it to Meta AI, and it came back with a corporate valuation based on internet presence of my company at $12 million, and I'm going, I wish.
I look forward to being invited to your yacht in the south of France.
So again, it's very subjective, but just play with it. Don't take it too seriously, and if you're using it for work, make sure that it's not a replacement for work. It is a tool that can help you work better, faster, smarter.
Yeah. Indeed, and it's all about live and let live. Ultimately, this argument, this discussion about various religions, it's all about. In fact, I think one of our correspondents, Danny, said, "Look, why can't we all just get along?" That's really what it's all about. It's just the 1 in 10, as I often refer to. It's just the 1 in 10 in society who just feel this need to control others, who feel this need to run the world themselves. And in fact, and again, it's a rabbit hole I don't want to go down here, James. Is that when you look back at most wars throughout history, most of them have actually been driven by religion, various religions. I look at the Crusades as an example. There you go. There's Christianity. There's the live and let live of Christianity going across to the Middle East to take on the Muslims. Another great religious war, and then countless religious wars ever since. I'm trying to think how many religious wars were created by the Sikh community. Probably not very many. I think the only wars they ever got involved in were probably about geography, not religion. So anyway, let's not go down that rabbit hole. But interested actually to hear our audience's thoughts on that one. Let's move on to our final set, James, as time marches on. K.S. Sandhu says, good morning to you as well, gentlemen. Well, a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you may be watching, to all our audience, James. It's we love our audience. They're always so polite to us on the whole, aren't they?
Exactly. Yeah, and depending on where you're at in the world, it depends on where you're going or what time you're watching us, so...
Absolutely. And Jat Gabru, we talk about the LA referendum. I will fly to LA. Well, get on that plane, Jat Gabru. Get to LA. Get as many people together as you can. Get to LA. Get your vote in that amazing referendum. It's coming. Was it March the 23rd, isn't it, James?
It's the 23rd, but I'd recommend taking an airplane. It's going to be much easier than flying yourself.
Well, there is that, yes. And Avtar Dylan, compliments me on my French. Thank you very much. Well, my French is, I did actually live in France for a number of years, and Switzerland, French Switzerland, and that's a result of it. Unfortunately, I've forgotten most of it. Certainly couldn't do enough anymore to run a whole show in French, James. But I think despite your name, James, as you explained the other day, your French is not quite so good.
No, not at all. And let's be honest. A lot of people in France would actually be insulted because they consider Canadian French to be kind of a, excuse the term, but a bastardized version of French. So.
Indeed. In fact, actually, I wonder if I could even speak in Quebec, if they'd even understand my French.
That's
probably
right.
not, probably not. And then final comment of the day comes from Iqbal Singh. Thank you, Iqbal, for your comment. Appreciate both of you guys. Well, we appreciate you, and I wanted to highlight this comment because actually the appreciation goes both ways. We couldn't really do the show without you, our wonderful audience, all of you in our audience, particularly our regular viewers, and thank you for your support. Thank you for all the comments that come in, James. I mean, we really couldn't do the show without them, could we?
No, not at all. And we love the comments. It really gives validation to the show and what we're doing, and the fact that we believe so strongly in what we're doing here. So thank you very much for accepting our program and being a part of it, because again, it's a joint effort between everybody watching and us doing this here from the studio. So. Indeed.
So, which actually brings us conveniently to the end of Perspectives for another day. But please do keep those comments coming in. As you know, we really do appreciate them. We love particularly the educational comments and highlighting bits. Hat B, thank you for highlighting about Jaggy. We saw the news at the same time as you. So, but that was a great example of letting us know breaking news as it happens, because we do keep an eye on the comments all throughout the day and the night. And so, if you do see breaking news, do let us know in the comments. It's very, very helpful for us. But thank you for all the comments that have been coming in. Don't forget, you can message us directly at message@satellitetv.com if there's anything you want to bring to our attention, as many of you have done. Thank you for your links to various YouTube videos and things that we try and watch. If they're in Punjabi, unfortunately we can't understand them, but if they are in English, thank you for those. We can indeed watch those. But anyway, that has brought Perspectives to a close for another day. Thank you so much for watching once again. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.